Welcome to the Health and Wealth Power Hour, the podcast that provides you with the knowledge and insights you need to achieve physical, mental, and financial well-being. I'm your host, Arlen Pickett, a business consultant who's passionate about helping people achieve a more balanced and healthier life. Each week, we'll deep dive into topics related to health and wealth, including retirement income planning, innovative healthcare solutions, alternative funded health plans, and specific actions individuals and business owners can take to gain control of their finances, have access to affordable quality health care, and achieve peace of mind. We'll also be joined by innovative experts who will share their knowledge and insights on prevalent topics. So, whether you're looking to grow your wealth or improve your health, you've come to the right place. Get ready to be informed, inspired, and empowered. Let's get started. All right, gang, man, we got a good one for you today. Arlen Pickett, Health and Wealth Power Hour. Thank you for being with us today. We have with us on this episode, Mr. Sam Liddy. Now, Sam is a banker, kind of financier, kind of in the medical world type stuff. I'm going to let Sam tell you more about his background and what he kind of is bringing in, very innovative ideas and thoughts into that finance that focuses more on the healthcare world. Now, I'm going to give you a little bit of a warning, folks. I've spent about 20 minutes talking to Sam already. We may have already talked about the best stuff before we ever started recording this thing, but we've had some great conversation. We're going to try to duplicate some of that for you today. But I'll tell you what, I think we're going to have some very interesting things to touch on. If you're in this healthcare world, if you're in the finance side, if you've thought about looking at private equity or other ways to finance even a startup, or maybe you've been in it for a long time and you're looking to do some expansion, but mostly if you're on that innovative, cutting edge type thing, then this is probably a gentleman that you want to have a conversation with. Sam Liddy, welcome to the Health and Wealth Power Hour, sir. It's a pleasure and an honor to have you with us.
Arlen, thanks for having me on. Pleasure to be with you.
Man, I'll tell you, just in our conversation so far, I can tell that you understand, and I'm going to be honest with you, this is very rare that I find someone in the finance world that will tell me anything else. Well, yeah, I know it's broken. I know there's not, there's a lot going on. It doesn't work right. The healthcare system doesn't work right, but I don't really understand enough about it. We look at somebody and we say, yeah, they're either a good candidate or not for finance based on traditional methods. You've already told me you guys look at things a little bit differently because you're forward thinking about how would this investment or how is this company going to change, hopefully for the better in every case that you're looking at, the patient experience. Very novel concept, I can promise. Just like, Eagle Care, just like we do, looking to change that customer experience in a positive way from traditional insurance, you're looking at that from the beginning when you're trying to decide if a good investment is going to be made.
Yeah, absolutely. And, the way that our company is structured, so, as you said, I've been a healthcare investment banker for the entirety of my career. I've worked on a lot of M&A transactions, taking companies public, worked on debt deals, kind of everything in between. And, everyone on my team my colleagues that I work with, they come from similar backgrounds, with the exception of kind of the operations and commercial people. They've actively run divisions or companies, and they have a skill set that I'm constantly in awe at, because when we move things around and do transactions, they actually make things happen in companies. But, for us, and, I had spent my time working at a number of different banks. And, then about 2 years ago, I was sitting there and saying, what do I actually want to do with the rest of my life? Like, do we just want to, keep taking large companies public and doing M&A deals? And, thankfully I have friends who are also, very experienced, who I've worked across the table from. I've worked in the same bullpen as, and we spoke about it. And the question became like, what do we want to spend the rest of our life doing? And it was, we want to work with companies that are trying to help patients at the end of the day, that are trying to do good. And, so we started TCB, and we're structured as a merchant bank. So we offer traditional investment banking advisory services. We also put money into companies. It's our proprietary, it's our own money. So, obviously we're pretty careful with where things go. And, we constantly want to be able to grow that, to put more money out there into the market. And we've been really selective with the companies we work with. Just to give you an idea on how our structure works, for us to work with a company, one of our clinical or scientific advisors has to vote yes before anything comes down to the bankers. Is the technology good? Is there actually a market for this? Is there a patient need for this thing? And, because there's a lot of great, I call them science experiments out there that might turn into businesses or might not. We need it one step further where one of our scientists, like we have the great support of our clinical and scientific advisory board. One person in particular, Dr. Ted Wittick, who's a Yale graduate. He's extremely experienced. He works for the University of Toronto. He also is part of the Columbia Hit Lab. He's weighed in on a number of different mandates we want to take on. We get no's and we get yeses, and we look at working with his yeses. And then it's figuring out from there, is the science good? Is there a patient need? Are they trying to do good as the next one? And then way further down on the line is, what's the transaction look like? How can we actually make this make financial sense? Because it does have to work on all sides. But if the science is bad or there's no patient need, you just forget about the rest of it.
But that's typically not the way these work, right? Typically, the way an investment works is first is the financial look. I'm totally, I don't know. I'm asking the question. If it was in a traditional way, the first most important thing is, are we going to make money on this deal? And then we can look at all the other details. Is that fair to say?
In my experience as a banker, yes. Now, I can't sit here and say that I think that anyone else has is only thinking of the financial, because I don't know what goes on in their head. I just know that historically it's financial diligence first. In larger banks, it then goes to research analysts. They look at vetting it. They look at the technology's good. But it's almost like two sides of the same coin. So whereas for us, our clinical and scientific advisors have the power to say yes or no. And there's no pushing past it. So even though, myself and some of the other partners are the founders of the company, the scientists can just look at us and go, nope, we're not going to work. That doesn't work. And that's it. The conversation's over. And we built it that way because we understand the shortcomings of people trained and brought up in the financial institution, like myself, which is I'm going to think of the transaction. I'm going to think about how to get this deal done. And so we need someone in front of that's going to think about the important things first and is going to make sure that the incentives always remain aligned. So even if it's a control on ourselves, we still want to make sure we have it.
So can you don't have to mention obviously any company names here, but can you give me a couple of examples, both a thumbs up and a thumbs down that you guys have kind of gone through that, you're like, obviously you brought it to the scientists, you brought it to that far because someone on your team thought it needed to at least get there, right? Okay, this sounds in theory like a good idea. And then you had someone from that team go, I understand why you think that way, but I'm going to have to give this one a big thumbs down.
So I'll start with the positive because that's always the stuff I like better. We took a look. So a former executive from a company that had worked with one of the banks that I had been at a couple of years ago, got a position as the CEO for this new technology. They're focused on addressing or assessing cognitive decline in Alzheimer's patients. What that means is simply, you're starting to forget where your keys are, and I've personally witnessed the decline of someone suffering from Alzheimer's, and it is absolutely just devastating and a tragedy. And so their thought is, how do we catch this as early as possible? And so you go to your doctor and you say, I've been forgetting where to put my keys, or forgetting some names, like just simple things that could easily be written off. And as of right now, you have to go, from the primary care, they refer you to the neurologist. The neurologist sets up time for you to have a 90-minute to 2-hour appointment to go through a pen and paper written cognitive test. Then they say, yep, there's definitely a problem here. Then they send you for a confirmatory diagnostics. And then they say, yep, we're diagnosing you with Alzheimer's. And you could potentially at that point start utilizing one of the two approved drugs that are both recently approved. And again, there is no cure for this. The goal is to delay symptoms. And especially when the goal is to delay symptoms, the faster you get a diagnosis, the longer the quality of life impact is felt. And so that entire pathway right now can take 12 to 18 months from the time in which you start having a problem, you could have a cognitive decline, which is progressive, for 12 to 18 months. And I don't know, personally, I want every single, if God forbid I'm ever in that type of situation, I want every single day that I can. I want the time to fight. I want the time to be with my family. And what this company, what Altoida does, is they shrink that entire window to about 6 months from the time at which you start having an issue to the time in which you can start being treated. And the way they did this was they created a digital health platform utilizing AI, augmented reality, to enable a primary care physician to give a patient a tablet where they can do this test. And it's a whole bunch of tasks you have to do. They're watching your eyes, your biometrics. They're using speech recognition to see not only what you're doing and what your answer is, but how you get there. How difficult is it for you to do a task that should be, let's say, a level 2 difficulty? For you, it's a level 7. They can see it in your eyes. They can see it in your face. They can see it how you're doing it. And they're able to then assess your cognitive decline. That means that when your primary care physician, they now have the diagnosis already. They now have the cognitive decline read. They can send you to a neurologist for treatment. They can direct you directly to treatment. And then after the fact, you can you can get prescribed a medication. Is cognitive decline decreasing or increasing? Is the medication working? Is it slowing progression? And so, they're currently, that test is breakthrough designation. It's research use only. They work with pharma companies on clinical trials. They're moving towards their FDA approval trial. But amazing technology, amazing company. We reached out to one of our scientists. Instantly, he's like, I have 400 questions. It didn't happen to actually do 400 questions, but that was actually his response. And then we had calls with the CEO, with actual Dr. Ted Whitted on the call, discussing, working through. And then he came back and he said, I really like it. I think what they have is amazing. On the other hand, we had another scientist, and again, this one I won't mention by name, and I'll say this very simply. They looked at what was presented in the deck. They looked at what was presented on the company website. They looked at what was available in multiple places. They came back to me and they said simply, the company is not as far as they are saying they are. And sensitivity, specificity, these stats that say, how effective is their test, they don't line up. And he goes, I can't bridge the gap. And I said, listen, can you put together a recommendation? What could they do to put themselves in a better position? Because we always, again, want to move towards the positive. We want to help. And we presented it. We were told no, that we were wrong. Now, whatever my feeling on that company or my desire to want to help them, my hands are tied at that point. The scientist said no, put forth a recommendation. Company said no. I had to say, okay, sorry. And that being said, I still have the utmost. I still just want them to be successful. I think they are trying to do something good. We just couldn't be the person to work.
Right. Because at that point in time, it wasn't just about financial, because you brought the scientist in, and regardless of how good it looked to you, and you wanted to help, it still didn't matter, because he's like, what he's looking at, as you mentioned, is the scientific data. Saying it doesn't G-haul here. What they're saying and what I'm saying does not match up.
Yeah. And you can't, it's okay to be wrong. But once you know you're wrong, let's make sure it's right.
Yeah. Well, this is obviously a very different look on this. As you have, once again, I've never even heard anyone talk about it like this. Any person I've ever talked to on the investment side has always been on the money first, right? This is what we're looking for. If you don't even, if you don't have enough cash flow right now of this, we don't even want to talk to you. Those type things.
Yeah.
Why? Why? There has to be some background for you in the healthcare world. And yes, I already know the answer is yes. But there's a background of healthcare in your family, in your life, that helps you have a different view of this as well. So talk a little bit about that and how that shaped you to want to do these things differently.
Yeah. So, both of my parents, I was raised by two social workers. My mother ran housing programs for the mentally ill and homeless in New York. I grew up as a child around some of these programs. And so I think, and my father did the same thing. They've worked at drug court programs, all sorts of things. And so I grew up in an environment where I met many of these people that are part of these programs. And when you meet people that effectively the world forgot, and you start to learn that they're people. I mean, one of the most amazing human beings I ever met was this guy, Danny. He did the maintenance for a number, I think it was like 20 different housing programs in New York. My mom was running those programs. He had an eidetic memory. He could tell you what the color of a door was from 23 years ago with absolute certainty. He never forgot a single thing. And he had dealt with a lot of challenges, and he also was schizophrenic. He had been homeless for many years. He had gone through this program, and he got his life together. And then he spent the rest of his life effectively, if he's in charge of maintenance, he's making everyone else's life easy. And, there's not a single person that doesn't deserve the ability to be treated with respect and care and kindness as they navigate, which is a very scary thing. I mean, not all healthcare issues are, I have strep throat, or I don't know, pink eye, or something where it's, I just need antibiotics. Some things are a journey into the unknown of what tomorrow will look like. I have a family friend right now navigating a cancer diagnosis. She has been fighting for, I think, 4 or 5 years. She's had mutations. She's gone through all of the most challenging treatments that one can undertake. And this woman never complains and is the strongest human being I've ever met. Because even when, some of these things that, and again, we'll mention a specific treatment by name, but some of them are known to be extremely painful. Yeah. She never stops. She just says, okay, what's next? How do we win? How do we get another day? How do we get another month? How do we get another year? And so to be part of those journeys, and we actually, thankfully we spoke to her daughter who I've known for years and found out how she was doing. We were able to connect her with a company from one of the consultants we like to work with. And he created this company to help patients navigate their cancer diagnosis and treatment, because it is very scary. And so, he's a successful entrepreneur. He's had a company before that he grew, that had investors. He's moved on. And, so Thriver, they're doing some interesting things, and they're still in the early stages. But his entire focus is, how do we make this a little less scary for the patient? And how do we make sure that there are, oncology focused nurses that these patients can get on the phone with and ask questions to? Because when you work with your oncologist, they are very busy. And also, they normally tell you things and it's a shock, and then you don't hear anything else that happened that entire session. And so, he's trying to create greater infrastructure to be able to build a support network with clinically minded, educated people and treatment plans for patients. And so, that's not even a client of ours. Jason, the CEO, works with us on a number of things. And honestly, I just think what he's creating is beautiful.
It's, if you bring up cancer, obviously that's one of the scariest things people can be diagnosed with. And, in our healthcare system, none of the navigation is easy at all. It's not easy at all. No matter what your diagnosis is, no matter what your situation is, even just trying to get imaging done can be an extreme challenge, right? So when you start getting a diagnosis such as cancer, obviously what you mentioned to the fear of just hearing that word is, now I've got this fear I have to overcome. I'm going to preface what I'm fixing to say by something else here. And that is, most people want to be able to go wherever they want to go, right? Insurance or not insurance, they want to be able to go wherever they want to for the treatment and see whichever physician that they want to. That's what they say. Hey, that's why I want this kind of ABC health plan, right? So that I can go wherever I want to. But the reality is 99% of the people have no idea where to go. They have no idea what they need. They have no idea about the quality of this place. They have no idea about the quality of their physician. They don't know any of this information. And so a company like what you just talked about, and then some of the folks that we work with too, that help navigate you towards quality healthcare, can make all of the difference. Because unfortunately, a lot of times, if you have that same, you wanted this insurance company, so you go where you want to, and you got this whole giant list of 700 oncologists you can choose from. How in the world do you choose? How do you choose? Do you get a dart and just throw it out there? Do you choose the one that, Aunt Julie's friend from our Bunko Club used a few years ago and helped her get through her cancer that's not even the same as yours? Is that how you choose? It's a very difficult thing. So I understand what you're talking about with this group. Thriver, is that who you said it is? Thriver?
Yeah.
That's an amazing service, because there is no, in my opinion, there is no person more lost in the system right now than the person, at least at the beginning of getting that diagnosis of cancer, because the emotions are just absolutely overwhelming.
Yeah. And he founded this company because someone, I won't relay his entire story, but I'll just say that someone very close to him was navigating a cancer diagnosis, and he watched how it all unfolded. He goes, and I mean, the outcome was great. She survived. She got into remission. It's a real positive outcome. And he went, so many things are broken along this way. Let's fix them. And so now he's out there trying to fix it. And I think there's one thing that I would add to the fear that comes along with that diagnosis. Now, not all cancers are the same. Some are fast moving, and there's almost nothing that can be done to catch them until they're symptomatic. But what if the cancer that you're diagnosed with that may kill you could have easily been detected based on stuff that's currently available today, but is not as promoted or reimbursed? And that's where I think there's a disconnect between the available technology and I'll say the humane implementation of it. There's a company, and I absolutely love this CEO. He's a wonderful human being. So Eric Mayer of New Day Diagnostics, I've known them for many years, and I worked with them back when they were still called EDP Biotech. They're located out in Knoxville, Tennessee. And, they're not in New York or Boston or, California, where it is the easiest or a lower bar to raise capital. And so Eric's been an extremely crafty and, I don't even know what the right word for it, but he finds a way to keep chasing the dream of his shareholders, his founders, and himself, even with the fact that, they're in Knoxville, Tennessee, and it can be hard to raise there. But Eric merged with New Day Diagnostics. So EDP and New Day Diagnostics merged together, and then they actually acquired a German public company called Epigenomics. The reason I bring this up is Epigenomics had M-septonine on the market for a long time. And just to simplify this, they had a blood test to check for colorectal cancer. Right now, the primary screening modality is the colonoscopy or Cologuard, which is Exact Sciences test. And I mean, everybody knows Cologuard because they had 2 SNL skits on it. Kevin Conroy, who's the CEO of Exact Sciences, has done amazing work when it comes to patient advocacy. And his entire team, if you met with anyone on their team, they're going to say the same thing or some variation of it. Colonoscopy covers this many people. We cover this many people. There are 60 million patients unscreened in the market today, and we need to get that down to 0 no matter what. And so they're right. There's 60 million people that could be screened on an annual basis very cheaply. Epigenomics had an approved test. New Day now has an approved test. Originally, they were reimbursed by CMS for that test. So again, you could have gone to Quest, got the test done, your insurance would pay for it. CMS raised certain thresholds. So on sensitivity and specificity, just randomly. It wasn't as if there was a new test on the market that was getting approved. They just said a test below this threshold, we will no longer reimburse. So those 60 million Americans who didn't want to get a colonoscopy and didn't want to do a FIT test, an exact test, they just had no option instead of having an option. And I mean, I personally taken the M-septonine test that New Day offers. I know of specifically, and they're still an early, release to kind of do a beta test in their local market. 2 patients that took their test that they found precancerous polyps. They were able to go to the doctor, get them removed. And, I do believe that cancer therapeutics are a way, obviously to cure it once it's there. But if you're looking at survival rates and you can catch it phase 1, phase 2, especially with like colorectal cancer, which is one of the leading causes of death for men. And it should be screened. It can be screened. There's absolutely no reason that it's being found in stage 3 or 4. And one of the main reasons it is because patients are told, get your colonoscopy every 10 years and you're fine between then. And that is 100% wrong. It means you're fine at that moment. And next year or the year after or the year after that, you may develop colorectal cancer, but you're not going to get tested again for another 10 years. And some might argue, well, based on the growth pattern, 10 years is a safe window. But then why is the mortality rate so high from a very curable cancer? And so New Day, not only, again, not to focus on the negative, New Day is trying to solve this problem. Eric Mayer is out there promoting M-septinine, the current test. The company is working extremely hard on the next generation test, which boosts sensitivity and specificity farther. It would have industry-leading precancerous polyp detection rates and adenoma detection rates. And the truth is, they're not alone. I mean, if you don't mind me jumping into another company here, I'd love to share it.
That's why we're here. We're here to hear about all these things because, I mean, I told you, give a couple examples. Heck, get as many as you want there, brother. Go for it, man.
Well, and this touches on when we talk about the good private equity, the good VCs, the people that are putting their money behind what they actually believe in. I think about Green Park and Gulf Ventures. They're Texas-based, and I've known them for a bit. And they actually introduced me to one of their portfolio companies, Greger Diagnostics, who the CEO there is just amazingly talented as well. And they're focused on basically a different approach to screen for prostate cancer. Currently, there's the PSA methodologies. There's some blood tests. There's some other urine tests. Effectively, all paths lead to biopsy. That's in the end right now. And, the level of negatives is about 50%. So that means 50% of patients go through a really painful procedure that does have implications on quality of life, does have issues that it causes. And so 50% of those people needed nothing. And that, again, the doctors use the modality, the testing available, and they say, well, this is what we're getting, this is what we're going to have to do. And so the Greger Diagnostic team have looked at it and said, well, what doesn't work in this system? And instead of utilizing blood or urine, they created a seminal fluid-based test. They actually created an amazing collection tube, which maintains the genetic material the way that they need it. So it actually, sheds certain material and stores it appropriately so they can use this test. And they're currently moving through, their FDA approval pathway. Green Park and Gulf has been really supportive of their mission, which, again, it's twofold. It's, how do we make sure that painful diagnostic tests like a biopsy are not happening unless they need to? And so the answer to that is their early screening test. So you utilize their test, you're able to come back, you get a response from that. It tells you, do you need to go for a biopsy? And now you're only doing a confirmatory biopsy. It should lower the unneeded biopsies by, I believe, about 70% is what they're estimating. So only patients that need biopsies will go get biopsies. But the thing that really excites me about this is when you then have a biopsy and then you end up, having, a low risk of cancer, they end up putting you in these active screening biopsy programs, right? So every so often you have to go back and get another biopsy, and another biopsy, and another biopsy. The problem is, again, we just said it's an inconvenient, painful test that people do not want to take. So I just spoke to you about a colonoscopy, and we got 60 million Americans out of 150 that don't want to take that. A prostate biopsy is a lot worse than a colonoscopy. So people you think are not doing it. Greger's test works on the screening side, and in the long term, their goal is to have another test to be able to do active management and to be able to see these patients came back as low risk. We have to keep running them over and over and over again. And then eventually, if the results come back a certain way, then you send them for the biopsy. Biopsies become a last resort to make sure the patient's cared for, which will keep patients from dropping out of the active surveillance programs. Because right now they drop out, and then again, they drop out, they stop doing their biopsies, they get cancer, they have to then go to treatment or they're dead. And so, this can change that. And can again focus on the patient. Now, that doesn't mean the patient is the only we have to exist in the world we exist in. And so the question becomes, does this take revenue away from the physicians? And the answer is no. It brings an early test, and the active surveillance mean they'll have less patients dropping out of surveillance. So it actually can stabilize revenue for some of the specialists. Then you have to say to the payers, right? Because it lowers unnecessary biopsies, which have downstream consequences, and instead focuses on getting the right people to the right treatment as quickly as possible. Meaning, again, later stage treatment is more expensive than early stage treatment.
Absolutely.
And so there's a lot of, so when all of these companies think about what they're doing, while patient advocacy, for everyone I've mentioned here, patient advocacy is the number one thing for them, they also make sure to package it in the right way because the business side does have to work. So they think about all the stakeholders. For Altoida as an example, maintenance proves they can prove if the drug is working by, maintaining the screening with the Altoida platform. That can lower the cost for the insurance company. Early detection lowers the cost for the insurance company, creates revenue for primary care without taking away from the specialist. And so these companies, not only do they create beautiful technology that will save lives and give people the chance to actually fight for themselves, they also found a way to make economic sense from all sides of the healthcare ecosystem, which, to be honest, is something you have to do in today's market.
Yeah, it really is. When you were talking about colonoscopies earlier, I was really shocked. It's obviously one of the more common cancer screening, but it also makes up of all the different techniques out there, all the different techniques of cancer screening, not just colorectal, but any cancer screening. Colonoscopies make up 55% of the total spend. 55% of the total spend in the United States for cancer screenings, all combined, 55% are colonoscopies.
Yeah. And think about how many people we're missing. What does that tell you?
It's a good point. It's a big business. When you were talking about all of a sudden, here's this blood test that they changed. I'm like, wonder if the colonoscopy people had anything to do with a little influence on the FDA. Not that anything like that happens in the healthcare system.
I like to think that, and maybe I'm naive. The truth is, I like to think that people realize that there are multiple ways to get these things done. And, colonoscopies are not going away. Like, they're not. But we could make sure that the right people are getting them. Exact Sciences test is an amazing test. It's not going away. But for the people that don't want to do either of those tests, are they just supposed to wait and die? And the thing is, we know that's not the case because even Exact Sciences, who is a large, successful company in this space, says there needs to be other solutions for the people that will not take the other approaches. Again, they care about the patient, even if the patient isn't their consumer. And I love that approach. I absolutely love it.
Well, obviously they're in that field, right? So they know if they just, to your point, if they just want to help people, it's that says, well, if you're not going to use our solution, at least use a solution. At least use a solution. Because I agree with you 100% that 10 years is too long. Because they don't even change that no matter what your age is. So you're more likely to get this, say, after 60. But if you check good at 60, you're like, see you in 10 years. Seriously?
And we know it's a cost thing because it happened in Europe, where they increased the amount of blood that had to be present in your stool to get a colonoscopy. I don't know about anyone else. Blood isn't good in your stool. It's not a good thing to have going on. We got to measure it. We got to, it's just over the threshold. Let's get you a test. They had to do it because the state-run insurance was going to go broke. It's an expensive test. And that being said, compared to some diagnostics, it's not that expensive. But it's widely utilized. So it's expensive enough, widely utilized, that we cannot cover the entire population. It's not possible. And the amazing thing is, like, New Day's test, as I mentioned, they are so focused on what they call democratizing healthcare that, they're out in Appalachia. It's, their focus is their local community and what they see going on around them. And their rates of colorectal cancer are much higher than other areas of the country. And they want to charge, it's between $200 and $300. That's the test. So that's the current test and the advanced test that they're working on getting approved right now. And it's not even a novel test. They're basically the new approved test is literally taking their proprietary work to improve performance on the current test. The foundation is good. It's been proven. It works. It's been stable for years. And now they have internal biomarkers that they can utilize to get it effectively to outperform any other comparable blood test that's coming to the market. And they can do it at a $200 to $300 per test cost. Whereas the majority of liquid biopsy tests, even in colorectal cancer, $800, $1,200, $2,500 per test. So, I mean, I just love the approach. Let's make a great test and let's make it affordable. We're still going to make money. Everybody's going to win. And the patients, I mean, every time I hear from Eric Mayer about a test that came back positive and somebody who got early stage polyps removed, he just goes, this is the reason I do this. This call is the reason I do it. It's amazing.
Yeah. And, I know you're not currently in Texas, but you live here too. And Texas is a big state. We have lots of healthcare deserts here. So we have people that simply will not make that effort, even if it's their 10 years or it's their time. They're not going to have it done. They're just not. If they had an alternative that was easier to access, which I know that's part of what Cologuard is, right? We're going to mail you this thing. You're going to do your thing, and then you're just going to mail it back. Now we have accessibility for someone to at least have that test done. So that gets someone who is not, in a decent drive to where they can get a colonoscopy. It removes that excuse. It removes that barrier. And once again, and I love this because, again, you mentioned it too. We don't see it. First we did, but we don't really see any insurance companies or even health shares or anything that don't pay for that as well. They are now fully bought into this works and, is a very valid way to get that. So I would love to see the blood test come back in because you're still going to have people that that won't do the other two. I do want to touch on something else that you talked about earlier in the first group, and that's the Alzheimer's. And I think both of these tests will go right in there. Typically, whenever you have your colonoscopy, you're obviously working now with a gastro doctor of some kind. Maybe you don't even have a gastro doctor. I myself did not have a gastro doctor at all till I went and got my colonoscopy. I saw that doctor one time, quite honestly, saw him as I'm on the table, right? I mean, that's it, as it were. Saw him then, didn't see him afterwards, got my results, you're all good.
Wait, yes, let's make sure we get you introduced to New Day so you can get your annual blood test to create that bridge between your colonoscopies.
Right, but I want you to think about it. This is where the disjointed happens. Because what did you say earlier? In the Alzheimer's example, you said they sent you over to a neurologist, and the neurologist did all this other stuff. And in the old way, they gave you the test, they did all these things. I just had a conversation with a gentleman this morning, and this is why it's fresh on my mind. All of these things, because they're not wrapped around primary care, can get completely lost in the shuffle. They don't even know what's happened. They don't know the results of your colonoscopy. They don't know the result of your neurological test. They don't know because we're not seeing the communication. Our system is not set up for the communication of these doctors back and forth. Let me change that. The system, there's things in place to do it. It's just not done. It's simply not done. So now your primary care physician is at a disadvantage because he or she do not know exactly what's going on with you. How can they make the proper recommendations if they don't know what else is going on? The gentleman this morning said his wife's rheumatologist, cardiologist, I'm missing one. So primary care, rheumatologist, cardiologist, and or spine doctor None of them talked. All of them had her on different medication. All of them were writing scripts for her.
Those doctors need to talk because it can be a big impact on each other issues. Yeah.
And last year when we met, I was kind of going through this. I said, man, she's taking way too many medications. And well, this is what he found out, that these doctors were not talking. She was taking about 15 different medications, and now she's down to 4. So he was like, you're on the money. These doctors had no idea what each other were doing. And part of it now, he said part of it was their fault. He admitted, he goes, we went to them and we never even brought back a report. Yes, they should have been contacting each other, but whenever they would see the primary care physician, he would ask how this was going. Oh, went fine, had no surgery, everything's good. Like, you didn't update your medication list to tell this primary care? No, we figured they knew. Why wouldn't they know? Why would they know? Actually, they should know, I agree, but they don't. So it's a continuing issue, but my point there is, if these primary care doctors have access to these things, then they know what's going on. And primary care doctors can actually handle about 80% of the things. Some of your direct primary care and advanced primary care physicians, about 90% of the things going on, which means you don't have to go to specialists as much. And the more of these tests that are in their hands that they can administrate in their own office, even the less need to send you out, unless there is a problem detected, right? They're not going to do the removal of those polyps if the test comes back and says there's polyps. Now there's a real need for them to get you with the gastro doctor, for you to be navigated through that, see what the process is going to be, get that taken care of. And if you're using navigation like you talked about, the navigation then can make sure that the primary care physician understands what happened and the information gets back to them as well.
Yeah, I mean, it's a challenging pathway, right? We have to be the advocates for our own healthcare, which is also, I mean, I don't know about anybody else, but I look at the forms when I go to fill something in for a doctor, and I'm like, do I really want to put about the knee surgery I had 9 years ago? Do I really want to talk about the ear issues I had as a child? And like, the truth is, yes, you have to, because, we don't know what everything can be. And then, am I going to make sure to fill out the HIPAA form so that my specialist can talk to my primary care? Yeah. Because until I do that, the primary care physician doesn't even know there's anyone he's supposed to be talking to. And so it's like, okay, I'm going to just put this in. It's going to be on file. Now, that being said, at that point, if I filled out my HIPAA form, if I've given all the information, if I've actually given the best, patient history I can, and then they're not communicating, well, that's a different question. But normally when the physicians are given all the tools and you tell them, I'm going to be having a surgery here, my doctor put me on this medication, they start to kind of, even if it's not directly talking, the patient journey on one side starts to navigate to adjust the treatment plan on the other. But that's only if you're in a position as the patient to actually, advocate for yourself.
Right.
As someone gets older or sicker, they're not able to do that. Like my family friend I mentioned is going through her fight with cancer. Her advocate is her daughter. And her daughter goes to every single meeting. She records she used to take notes, and she said the notes didn't work. So now I record them, and then I digitize them afterwards, and then I read through the notes. And she gave her notes when I introduced her to Thriver, and he goes, this is amazing work. He goes, I've never seen anything more detailed. Now, again, the sad thing is she's had to develop this skill set over helping her mom navigate care for years. But I don't have that. I wouldn't be able to do that. Like, I've been in healthcare my entire career. And the truth is, I don't advocate for myself exactly how I should. I kind of assume the doctors are going to do it. So, I think it's kind of a call to action for all of us, which is if your healthcare really matters to you, advocate for yourself, because nobody else is going to.
Yeah, that's so interesting you say that, because we've been telling people that for years, until we actually started building health plans that's built in, that they actually advocating for them is built in, and we help them through that journey. We were telling people, you've got to be your own advocate. When you have XYZ insurance company and they're trying to tell you this, you got to say, stop for a minute. I want this. Why are you telling me I can't do this? Why are you telling me I have to go here whenever I want to go here? Aren't both of these places in your network? Yeah, well, why are you sending me over here? Because I think that is a very common that people get sent somewhere by the insurance company that actually has no, in my opinion, no place in determining what your care is. Your care is between you and your physician. But many people don't know what to do. And that's what we saw over years. We saw that people have no idea what to do. As I mentioned earlier, they want to be able to go anywhere, but they don't know where to go. So why are you asking the insurance company where to go? You should be asking a clinician. It should be clinician guided navigation to make sure you're going to the highest quality location for your healthcare.
Yeah. And also there's, patients have a lot more rights than they think. I was in the hospital years ago. I had to have a procedure, and while I was coming out of anesthesia, the billing person for the hospital came in to get me to sign some papers. And so, I signed, she could have asked for my house. I didn't know what was going on. I signed everything. Now, then they reached out to me afterwards and they said, okay, we need to set up stuff based on this. And I went, I have no idea what you're talking about. And she goes, you signed all the documents. And I said, when? And they gave me the time, and again, now I've engaged in this conversation with them. I didn't just say yes. I asked more questions. I wasn't trying to avoid paying. They provided a service. I had come out of the procedure really well. I owed them what I owed them, but there's a way to go about these things. And, I basically in an email, I made sure not to say this over the phone. I wanted to be in writing. I said, I just want to be very clear. I do not understand what agreement we had signed, because when I signed it and when it was discussed with me, I was under the effects of anesthesia and still hadn't fully regained consciousness. I think we have a fresh conversation to work through this together. And now the instant response from the hospital was extremely positive. It was someone else who came back to me and they said, okay, let's work through this. Let's figure this out and let's align. But again, I had to advocate for myself. And in most cases, I know someone would have just started paying the bills. But I had signed off on an out-of-network doctor. I didn't have any idea what was going on. So, but again, by engaging in that dialogue and not automatically fighting with them, but by engaging in the dialogue, explaining my issue, they were willing to work with me, which is good, because the last thing I wanted to do was, have them come after me for not paying the bill. But also, I didn't want to pay for some of the things. I didn't felt it was fair the way it had gone down, and they fixed it. Now, I can't say that that's a common occurrence, but I can say that just knowing your rights in any of these situations is definitely really important.
Well, I'll tell you, it's not a common occurrence because most people don't push back. Most people don't advocate for themselves. In our world, there's a pretty famous book out there called Never Pay the First Bill. It's by a gentleman by the name of Marshall Allen, and he was not at the time a healthcare person. He was an investigative journalist, and what he found out through all of his investigation is you never pay the first bill, and that is because if you do that, there's no telling what they're adding. No telling what most times your bill doesn't even have the details, right? You don't even know what is all in there. You just figure, why the insurance company's paying their part, I'll pay my part. That's what I've got to do. That's just what it is. But there's so much missed on that. There's so many times there's things on there that shouldn't be on there. To your point, there are times people have signed things that didn't even know they were signing things, whatever that looks like. Unfortunately, we lost Marshall earlier this year to a heart attack, but he was a huge advocate in the healthcare world because of what he had learned. And he did trainings. He literally trained people to advocate for yourself in this healthcare system, saying, it's the only way you're going to survive. It's the only way you're going to get out alive of the healthcare system is to advocate for yourself and understand that that's the way to get the care you deserve at the price that's fair. Because that's all you were asking for, right? That's what you just said, Sam. You weren't saying I'm ungrateful. They did a good job. You came through well. You were happy with the service you got. You were just unhappy with the way things went down.
Well, I'll just say I was confused. I didn't know what was going on. and that's kind of it was more a feeling of, in that unique case, feeling violent. And that's what I explained to them. I said, I want to feel safe in the hospital. And they responded back, you absolutely should. You shouldn't have been asked to sign the papers at that time. And then they looked into it, whatever they did on their side. But they made it very clear. What happened was not okay, should not happen, and we're going to take care of it. And I said, okay, so let's start from scratch, right? Because I don't know about, it's easy to defend in a way with aggression because you feel uncomfortable. And that just doesn't work with those type of institutions. And I think when we talk about healthcare in general, it's kind of like there's a drive to villainize, I think, the entire system or the companies. And instead, I like to focus on the ones that I think are helping. And it gives me hope for what it can be. Like we just spoke about it, just on this conversation, and we're talking about a number of companies, and there's like 6 or 7 other ones that I can think of off the top of my head that either they're creating technology that's going to save lives. That's always dependent on if the venture capital firms decide to fund them or not. I mean, you can't control every piece of it, but I think what that created is amazing. Then there's the other companies that are still well-funded. There's even some pharma companies that I know focus in early stage biotech that the CEO only cares about the patient. Some of them are survivors of the same illnesses that they're creating cures for. So it's easy to look at like big pharma or the payers and then see where things are where we don't like. And I just choose to make my world a lot smaller and spend time around the people that I think in the long term will be the solution and will, hopefully in 10 years and 50 years and 20 years, have a different conversation about this because the people that wanted to help changed a lot more than the people that want to hurt were able to impact. And that's just my hope.
So I'm not going to keep you much longer, but I would be remiss if I didn't ask you what you feel like the implications, both short-term and long-term, of the burgeoning of AI is in this industry, and in particular in future financial opportunities that you guys have for investment. Because it seems you've already mentioned one company that's obviously utilizing that and learning, but are you seeing more and more of it? Are y'all being introduced to more and more of it? Do you think it is just, I personally believe it's the tip of the iceberg of what's coming, but I'll be interested to see from a financial side what your thoughts are.
Yeah. And so I don't spend much time on the AI, novelties. Like I have, friends who showed me, you type in this thing and something will write you a song. And for me, that's cool. Okay, great. Moving on. But AI and machine learning and diagnostics has been around for a long time. And it's evolved. What has happened in the last couple of years is an amazing, just exponential growth. But there have been companies that have utilized AI and machine learning to layer on top of diagnostic tests and tools to be able to look for genetic mutations and all sorts of other things that wouldn't have been able to be done without this AI overlay. But when you look at something like we're talking about Altoida and what it can do, it's only able to do it because of that type of technology. They've tooled those models over years and years and years. The interesting thing right now is the impact that AI is going to have on pharma development is one area that I think about, because effectively now, they can do at least the early stages of, looking for new compounds and new therapeutics and run different iterations based on their models to see what's going to be effective or not. So the interesting thing there is it could lower the cost of pharma development. It could increase the amount of new therapeutics that get onto the market, which means we might have a chance to, there are 6,000 orphan diseases. So, rare diseases with effectively no cure. And the way that rare diseases are treated, and especially where the FDA approves, there's a much lower bar for orphan disease pharmaceuticals compared to when you're competing against, a standard of care. And, I think about if you could run multiple iterations of different compounds, look at how to treat the same orphan disease at a much lower price point, we might get a much higher quality. And rare diseases are a tragedy because, yes, the FDA does give it preferential treatment. And so companies and money does go there. But, again, there's still, 6,000 plus diseases that have no cure. A lot of them affect children and, you shorten lives. So, I think there's that component of it. And even when we talk about Alzheimer's, there's a possibility that can have an impact there. There's also just the impact on, moving forward diagnostic timelines, being able to create more effective and efficient diagnostics, leveraging these tools. The digital health platforms that are coming out that could, in one case, solve the issue you were discussing about the disparate communications between providers. If there is a unified and central EMR, or at least the EMR is set up to really portal across all different platforms, and if the patient controls their medical file, is something that people have pushed for years. Not everyone, and not everyone wants it. I mean, me personally, I would love it. I can basically I can give them access to it through technology. That would be a little more interesting to me, because I don't even know where all my records are, to be honest, or even all the images I've ever taken. I have a folder of every MRI I've ever had. There could be 7 more for all I know. So, not to kind of bounce around here, but really the long and short of it is I think AI has the potential to impact the way that we interact with our healthcare, but also the way that we navigate it and the way that we treat and evaluate diseases and disease states today. So it's kind of an umbrella of, it could change everything, and it could be extremely positive. I pray that we don't get lost in the novelty of it, because so many people do. It's like, ChatGPT is cool, and there's a lot of interesting stuff for it. It's not what excites me at the end of the day. What excites me is like what Fulgent Genetics has done with with AI, and how they've empowered it into their probes to, look at genetic mutations in a way that couldn't have been done before. Like, that to me is what excites me.
All right, so I'm going to hit on one subject, because I cannot have a guy that does finance of companies and helping consult with companies out there without asking you the question that probably a lot of people want to know, and that is how do you make your company a better target? And what I mean, I guess, by that is, what are some things that you can do if you really are looking to have someone invest in your company, whether that's VC, whether that's private equity, whether that's just an investment banker, whether that's, if you want to work with whoever it is. What are some of the simple things that companies can do? Maybe they're not simple, but maybe in your world they would be considered simple, that you could do to prepare your company to be more attractive for someone like that.
Yeah, and that's a great question, because it's multi-pronged in a sense. So, the first thing is really not to be myopic. Like, when we started TCB, the way that we built this out, we said, what is every single deal we ever failed at? And why did it fail? Not what is every deal we were successful at throughout our banking careers. We said, what went wrong? Let's figure that out. Because historically, bankers will put out stats and they'll say they're 96 or 99% successful. No financial professional has ever been 99 to 96% successful. And every banker you ever speak to off the record, they'll be like, yeah, that's based on these parameters. So it's kind of like being willing to look at what your mistakes are, what you've done wrong, and being willing to look at what other people have done wrong, and not in a sense of there's no ego attached. It's, look at the business and seriously say, is this a business? Is there a narrative here? Or is this something that produces, X amount of revenue every year? And that's great, but it's not robust. It doesn't have anything more. And then, because if you can accept that, then you can figure out, how do I turn it into the next thing? So, we do a lot when we work with companies. We start with their vision and understanding. So we sit there, we say, pitch us your presentation. We're going to record it, and we're going to watch it like 400 times. And this is a company that, where we want to work with, we want to help, let's say, bring in outside money for them, or help them find an acquirer. And then it's start to figure out, what are the things in that story that really aren't formed right. It might be hard. Maybe someone founded this thing. They love this company so much, they can't see it clearly. I mean, we were working with one company, and we realized that going through their deck a bunch of times, we couldn't understand the patient life cycle. A patient does something and then uses their product, and then, there's the outcome. And we had to go through this iteration with them a whole bunch of times to understand this. And so then the goal was to take that patient life cycle slide and make it something that, if I was to hand it to you today, you'd look at it, you go, I know exactly where they work. I know exactly what happens. And so some of that stuff is taking a step back. And, If it's a really small business, write up your deck, build your deck, hand it to someone you trust. Tell them nothing else. Say, read this deck and tell me if you understand what I do. And they'll probably read it and they say, no, I do. And then you realize without the voiceover, the presentation doesn't work. And so that's just like marketing and stuff like that. There's other stuff. There's making sure your cap table is cleaned up, looking through kind of financial loopholes, not loopholes, pardon me, gaps that you might have. So like a perfect example is, did you file your corporate tax return? Or did you write off all the expenses of your business? And, is there a problem with that? How do you clean things up and get it ready? But do that before you go out to the investors. Do that before you look to be bought, and clean up the things you can, because people tend to be overly optimistic. And by the time they go out to the market to do one of these things, it's too late. They're like, now I got 2 months left to do it. You need to do these things in stages, because simply put, no investor, you're going to meet them on a Monday and they're going to invest in you on a Thursday. You're going to meet them on a Monday and then you both just know each other exists. That first meeting, I think of it kind of like, it's not even the first date. It's like you bump into someone at the library and you start talking and you go, oh, I got their number. That's that first meeting. And then over the next 6-7 months, you talk to that investor, they watch you grow, you go to meet them at lunches, you go to meet them at conferences, they get to know you as a person because they're investing in you as a person. And so a lot of the processes we do, that's how we try to build them. We try to say, okay, how do we position you the best from what you have internally, as well as how do we try to make sure that the work that you're doing to meet investors is about building a genuine relationship. I mean, it still has to be the right investors. If you talk to someone who only invests in defense contracts, based companies, and you're making widgets for hospitals, it's not the right fit. I mean, it'd still make a good friend. But so, part of it is the structure, part of it is the story, and part of it is the time to make it happen naturally and organically without that desperation. And I know that can be hard, especially for a lot of, entrepreneurs who are desperate. This is the hardest market I have ever seen. It is a tough market. But, like any tough market, if you weather the storm, the other side is normally pretty good.
So are these type of, and I honestly don't know, are these type of inquiries, if a company wanted to say, do y'all consult with companies that are thinking about doing these things and kind of help give them the ideas of the things they need to clean up before they take those next steps? Is that some of the services you guys provide?
Yeah. One of my mentors says it best. He says, we're in the friend business, and he's right. So, we'll take inbounds from companies, and sometimes it's as simple as we talk to them. We say, listen, there's nothing that we can do for you per se, but here's some advice and some guidance. Because again, especially like our focus is healthcare. So if they're on the same mission that we're on and they're trying to help patients, maybe there's not a buyer firm that we know or not an investor that we work with or we don't have money to put there, but we still want them to win, because if they win, the patient wins. And then other times, we'll work with a company, we'll start talking to a company. There's always kind of that initial thing. Just like I said, when a company's looking for an investor, there's a dating period. Same like us, when we start talking to a company, we know they're not like, yep, we're signing up for you today. It's, we want to discuss, because we also have to build that plan. We have to get our scientists and our clinicians to vote on it, as we said earlier. But to do that even, I have to have a general plan of who are you? What are you trying to do? How are you trying to achieve it? How could we help you? What are the things we can do? Because the way, when we direct invest is one thing, but also when we sign up an advisory client, so someone who's using banking services, we are very involved partner. So, sometimes we're helping them with BD efforts. Sometimes we're helping them look for things to acquire or to be acquired. We're reviewing their financials. Obviously, we don't do accounting services. There's a huge compliance issue of bank and accounting are the same group. But I've helped people select auditors. I've helped people, set up their IT infrastructure because they had interesting tech and they were all scientists and they're brilliant. But as far as building the infrastructure for the internal company, wasn't something that they know how to do. So, our team gets in there, works with them. Most of that stuff happens on the consulting side of our business. The commercial and operations strategy team, as they're called, because that's their expertise. I don't personally know how to do that stuff. So, our goal is to be an extension of the companies we work with to try to maximize the chance for their success. That's all. And that takes a lot of different forms. But, I still say at the end of the day, we all want to help patients, and we're all in the front business.
That's awesome. All right. I want to, so people across all different types of things, a lot in healthcare, but all different types of things, listen to the podcast. And a lot of that is because of the diversity of the folks that we've had listening. Who should reach out to you? Because we're going to share, your website, tcbcapitaladvisors.com. Who are you wanting to reach out to you to talk to you about being friends?
Healthcare companies that, are looking to, find investors, looking to acquire smaller companies or be acquired. So those fall into kind of the traditional banking buckets. Investors that are same thing, looking to, invest in early stage diagnostics, therapeutics, digital health. We also work with healthcare service facilities. We have a number of different, we structure our transactions a little differently. And we always try, this isn't a try. We absolutely don't take on conflicted mandates. So like I have one cancer diagnostic company focused in colorectal cancer. I would not take on a second one, those types of things. So, if an investor that's interested in working with or investing in early stage companies that are going to change the face of healthcare for patients, we would love to work with them and introduce them to companies that we're, either invested in or working with as an advisor. And then, the truth is, if there's anyone that's lost in the healthcare sector that we can be of help to, at the end of the day, we can't just say our goal is the patient and we're focused on helping. I can't say that I can help it when I'm a banker. That's my skill set. But if anyone listened to this podcast and they came away with it and they said, I want to talk to them, maybe they can help. I can't promise we can help, but I can promise I'll listen and try. Yeah.
Well, and you have a lot of connections in that world too. So maybe it's not you. Maybe it's somebody else. Hey, let me introduce you to this guy, this gal, because they have a lot more experience in that world. And maybe that, so there's connections, right? Well, I can tell you right now, just getting to know you through this podcast, I will value you as a connection as I go in and I talk to people that have ideas or have things like, wait a second, I got a finance guy that you may want to talk to because he may tell you, hey, I love what you're doing, but you're a long ways from getting what you hit. But here's some steps you could take. So just hearing what you say that to me, I think that's a valuable connection for me because I didn't know those things, Sam. I mentioned to you before, and maybe I even said at the beginning when we were recording, is I've always looked at PE and VC as the bad guys. I just always had, knowing that they can't all be bad, but just seeing enough of them be bad guys that I just decided all of them weren't.
Yeah. And I appreciate everything you're saying. And I also think it's completely understandable, which is, if the negative impact of bad behavior is so detrimental, the automatic fear of any engagement is normal, right? And because, you built something over your life. It's your baby. It's your company. It's something you believe in. The goal that you want to achieve is sitting there. And if you make the wrong decision, it dies. Or even worse of it not dying, it's used as a vehicle to hurt someone.
Absolutely. And I think that's the biggest fear that most people that have started their baby, that love it, nurtured, and did all these things, know that maybe if I had an influx of some more cash, I could do some more things. But then, man, what if it just blew up everything instead? And I lost that. And the people that I am helping, I couldn't help anymore. How could I live with myself anymore? Those type of things. And I think that's a valid fear that anyone would have. But especially if you've seen it happen to others.
Yeah. And I've been, as a banker working on things where we were brought in the aftermath of that. And I've seen it kill future transactions. I've seen it strangle companies. And that's where we come in and we say, if the goal is to raise money, but in a way that doesn't interfere with the primary mission of the company, that is very achievable. It's just about negotiating the transaction documents in a way that makes that a key focus. And there are absolutely investors that are focused on the mission of what you're trying to do. for the most part, if the mission was specifically targeting, the increased size of all zoos, that might be something I don't know. But when you think about what we're talking about here, where it is about patient advocacy, it's about humanity and healthcare. There are so many organizations, both mission-driven as well as financial-driven, that their primary focus is that, and they have a proven track record of over and over and over again making those impacts. Now, again, you have to package it to them the right way so that they understand there's still a way to make the return that they need to make. But, if the fear is they're going to exit in 5 years, there's evergreen funds that never exit, that are, they have a different type of structure. But again, you might lose some of the valuation there, but you're going to get the certainty that your business is going to continue a certain way. So there's a lot of different ways to navigate all of the different stakeholders, putting whichever the key one is for the entrepreneur at the focus.
And well, thank you so much for spending time with us, guys. Sam is obviously one of the good guy investors out there in the healthcare sector. I am certain that he would love to talk to you if you've got ideas, if you got questions, if you just want to make a new friend. There you go. Sam Libby is your guy. You can go out to submit a request for him to reach out to you at tcbcapitaladvisors.com. Sam, thank you so much for being with us, man. I sure appreciate your time today.
Thank you, Harlan. It's been a pleasure.
All right, guys. That wraps up this episode of Health and Wealth Power Hour. Don't forget to catch us on our other episodes that we have going on, our monthly podcast on LinkedIn. Why does healthcare suck? That's right. Why does healthcare suck? As we dive into all the craziness in the healthcare system and bring on clinicians and other folks to help you avoid some of those crazy situations. Thanks again for being with us. We'll catch you next time on the Health and Wealth Power Hour. We are out of here.